And around 7 o'clock, I felt a wave in the spirit realm. God's wave came in through, it seemed like it was through the man's next door, but it wasn't. It was from that direction. And it came to the kitchen, and it came to the front room, and I felt a wave peacefully coming towards me. A wave of God coming towards me slowly, very, very slowly. And it was so peaceful. And amidst it all, that's what encouraged me to go to Guyana, South America on a mission trip. And to release this message, The Power That Reigns in Our Prayer. They didn't know about it until it was going to be released. And there was even opposition before I released the message in Guyana. There was a leader, because each night they didn't let us know when we were going to release the message. So I had to pray on it again and pray on it again. Anyway, thank God it was more prayer. The power that reigns in our prayer. Amen. So there was more prayer proceeded. And looking at what happened, and the more prayer that was proceeded, there was a leader there, and she said something she shouldn't have said before I was to release the message, and she knew I was going to release that message that night. But she said something offensive that I cried before I went to the meeting. Tears came my eyes. So my eyes watered, tears came my eye. And even then, you know, beforehand I asked the leader that set up the trip, I said to her that, can I get a plane home? Could I leave? And she says, I need £300 to go. I didn't have it at the time to leave, to get the next plane to get out. And I was going to ask God to cap the message, the power that reigns in our prayer. And all this opposition happened, but what came next is a miracle. And God specialized in signs, wonders, and miracles. The message is the power that reigns in our prayer. So she was telling me that I couldn't get the next plane home because I'll have to pay for the ticket. So I was going to ask God to cap the message. And it looked like, by what she said, I couldn't go anyway, so I had to do the message anyway. So I had to go against my will to release the message after all the opposition, because I was feeling like anybody else would feel like, is it worth it, all this trouble just for this message? Anyway, but in the end, it all was victorious, because I went to a church and I ended up going with a prophet and a pastor to a church. None of them prophesied. But I went to the meeting and I was preaching about Matthew 10:1, 7 and 8. As you go, Matthew 10:1 talks about healing the sick, you know, and 7 and 8 preach the gospel and the disciples and so on. So Matthew 10:1, 7 and 8 I was preaching on, and it was Matthew 10:1 to 10 I preached a message on. The preacher of the church, didn't tell me that he was building to expand the ground for the church. But God prophesied through me that we need to break ground. We need to break ground for more souls, you know, for the church to be bigger. And I was, Bishop Higgins was there with me of Guyana, and he's from Demerara, Guyana. And he was there when I prophesied that. And the preacher of that church that they took me to was at the edge of his seat, because he wanted me to carry on prophesying. And I kind of was coming down, and he was like wooing me not to come down, because he was encouraged by what I was prophesying, because he didn't tell me about the building plan, but they were building and fixing to break ground for a bigger church. And I didn't know. But I prophesied through the Lord that that we need to do it. Anyway, and it was, the preacher was at the edge of his seat. He didn't want me to finish, and he told me afterwards he didn't want me to come down. He wanted me to carry on. He was getting so stirred and so hungry for this prophecy. Anyway, so all this opposition led to a prophecy. The bishop didn't prophesy, and the pastor prophet didn't prophesy. Anyway, so let me go on with the power that reigns in our prayer, because it's a very powerful message. And for God to turn up, for me to release it, and I was going to refuse to go, let me tell you, it's one of the greatest messages I've ever preached.
Amen.
And what happened was, there were 150 young people there. And what happened was so great with these 150 people, because anybody that went up to go and preach in the team, they didn't have the same result. Sadly, they didn't have the same result. But they didn't have that opposition either. When they went to go and administer, they went to administer their messages, and they didn't let me know the time I'm going to release mine, but I got to release it anyway. And they never threw someone in to throw them off their message. So they threw a brother in to testify before the message, you see. And he went up to go and testify. He went up to testify before the release of this message. And when we look at this, these things, they throw you off because you don't expect that before you go to preach. You expect to go to the pulpit, carry your Bible, carry your notes, go up there, you pray beforehand, you go in the pulpit, and you go to the altar, and you go to release your message. When nobody else who went to go and lead, they had nothing like that. They had nobody to throw them off, and I had someone to throw me off. And that interrupted my flow a bit in the spirit. But let me tell you how God came through all the opposition.